So thank you for making the time to speak to me. Um, it's been interesting. I've been having chats with people from various disciplines within the broader context of music, therapeutic music provision. So that's uh, music therapists, so clinicians, to practitioners and community music facilitators and so on. So just to really talk about the efficacy of online music provision, because obviously this is, I imagine, a fairly new way of working in terms of delivering this kind of work online. So I think it does need a community of practice to develop around it, so that professionals can start to talk about their experiences. So as we go forward, we can sort of understand it better and the different ways of working. So that's the idea behind it. And as I understand it, you're a music therapist working in the Bay Area, so San
Yeah.
Francisco. Is that right?
Bay Area. I live in San Jose mostly now, but I do travel all around the Bay Area.
Yeah, okay. And I guess before lockdown, that was pretty much your experience of being a music therapist, was traveling around and working in different communities and different homes and with different individuals in various different places, right?
Yes, it's funny. I had actually just started my practice
Yeah.
earlier in 2020. I had just
Ah,
established contracts and I was just getting into it, and then the whole coronavirus hit, so I lost all my contracts. But it
yeah.
really forced me to be a lot more creative in the way that I thought about what I thought music therapy practice is supposed to look like.
Mm,
Um, but yeah.
yeah, it's certainly interesting to take something which is so multifaceted as any type of therapeutic music provision or clinical work. It's so multidimensional that it's very difficult to filter it through the online domain because it comes with its own restrictions,
Hmm.
the online method. And I found myself really simplifying what I do because I'm forced to, because of the interface. I don't
Hmm.
know if you've had that experience as well, where things have been streamlined almost out of your control, and you've had to sort of really narrow what you do down. Not in, I'm not saying that what we do gets less quality, but we
Hmm.
have to really pick and choose how we're going to present ourselves and the type of content we're going to deliver. Is that your experience, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I At first, when this whole thing happened and we realized I was going to have to go online, I was like, what am I gonna do? So much of
Mhm.
my focus has always been, interaction through playing together, through singing together, and it was just a whole different experience.
Mm.
I think it really forced me to be a lot more creative. There's so many things that you can do that involve music that don't necessarily involve us using instruments together.
Mm.
So that was kind of more a shift in how I thought of
Yeah,
music therapy.
I see. Yeah, yeah. I guess I've done the same, and obviously because I'm unable to hand someone an instrument, obviously physically, I've started to and there was an element of this in my sessions anyway, to have a sort of person-centered approach, but I've I've really tried to get into using objects
Hmm.
as conduits for all these different musical ideas. So for example, finding out what the individual is interested in and then acquiring those objects so that
Uh-huh.
songs can be written about those objects.
Hmm.
I've found that to be a very useful way of fostering a type of engagement which is actually really therapeutically beneficial for the individual. So I've had a lot of fun inquiring all these different disparate objects, toys, and so on, and making songs up about them and then performing them with the individual online. That's been quite gratifying and quite rewarding, actually. I've been quite pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's so hard, especially when I'm so used to bringing instruments, and it's no problem if I have all these instruments at my disposal. But my clients don't necessarily have that. They don't have
Mm,
keyboards, they have xylophones or drums. So it's thinking about what are some household items that we have that we can utilize, and how can
mm,
we incorporate that and create music out of it. And that in itself gives a lot of space for creativity for my
mm.
clients.
Yeah, That's good. Yeah, yeah, making instruments is really important because, as you say, it's very simple to make a shaker, for example. That's like your base. That's your bread and butter, musical instruments. So get a jar and fill it with money, and then you've got a shaker. Um, but yeah, I've been wanting. I mean, recently, being online. So what happened with me is that lockdown happened, and I lost all of my work within a click of a finger. So within 2 days, I lost.
Like
Yeah,
that.
just like that, just all went. And then I had sort of 2 weeks to just process that. So mid-March through to late March of just really just trying to, well, just at the start, just take a breather because I was working pretty hard up to that point. So just let's take a breather, and now let's think about how I can make this work. And by the beginning of April, I put a plan in place and started to sort of, reacquire some of the work that I had before lockdown, and also surprisingly some new work as well. I did a marketing push and actually gained some new work, which I hope to continue when we go back to face to face. But yeah, so I've been thinking about making some instruments actually that are sort of learning disabled friendly, or friendly to someone with certain physical limitations. So I've been thinking about making like a really basic stringed instrument on a plank of wood with just a single wire. It could be acoustic or it could be electric, things like that. I've been sort of brainstorming ideas. So I hope to sort of do that at some point. I mean, the funny thing is I thought I was going to have all this time. I was thinking, well, I'm online now, so I'm going to have loads of time. But actually, I'm busier than I ever was for some reason. I don't quite know how that's happened. Are you finding that you're sort of a new sort of busy?
Being online requires a lot more planning on my side. There were times where when I'm in person, it really just flows so organically, and sometimes I don't even really have to come in with the established plan because it just flows so naturally. Now I'm finding that I have to have a little bit more structure, just because I don't have everything at my disposal, and in order to make sure that I'm engaging my clients in a way that's their. But it's, instead of focusing on instrument playing, we can do more singing, songwriting, reading together, focusing on cooperation and teamwork, and playing together.
Yeah, that's really good. And my in a way my approach hasn't changed. I mean, the foundation of my approach is intensive interaction, and the basis of that is to be responsive to a person's various presentations, and then funnel that through a musical context in order to engage in musical whatever it is. So that hasn't changed really for me. So I'm still finding myself responding to the individual. I'm lucky that I have a studio away from home, which is just ram packed full of different instruments and technology and computers and lots of different opportunities for creating music in various creative ways. So I have been afforded the ability to move quite organically wherever the individual may want to take the session. So I've been quite used to quite dramatically changing the tone of the session, the content and the structure of the session, which has been quite interesting actually. Is there anything in the way that you're working now online that is a bit of an eye-opener, a bit of a revelation that you'd like to carry on when you do go back to normal work? Is there anything that sort of inspired you to think, oh, I'll take that and apply that?
Yeah, I think that because going online has forced me to really think out of the box, out of the way that I've traditionally always thought. I'd really like to continue to carry that over. To be honest, I've actually really enjoyed going virtual because I've been able to reach out to a lot more people and a lot of different people. And my focus has been for a while with the special needs community, and I've found that I've been able to embrace other communities like wellness community, teenagers, using music. So I think that that's something to carry forward, is just, especially now at this time we really have been forced to take a step back. I know personally, I was really burned out right when this hit, and was feeling pretty lost because I was like, all I was doing was working and working, and it forced me to really take a step back and take a breath and slow down. So I'd like to continue that in my practice, just the way that I practice is just slowing down and just being okay with being there.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, and that's a great, just to narrow it down to that point, just being out the box is really important. Obviously, it's quite fundamental to what we do, even though I'm sure we work in different ways. Like being able to adapt on the fly is really important. And obviously, with these online, this interface, these so-called restrictions, it sort of forces you to think outside the box, and that's something I too would like to carry on into the work I'm doing outside. At least I want to be more present of myself doing that, you know, more aware of my more aware of the way I work and more present in myself. I guess if that was something, that would be something I'd want to carry forward afterwards. But I mean, you know, I mean, since April the 2nd, yeah, I've delivered about 250 sessions since April, since lockdown, since beginning of April. So I'm actually quite used to it now, in a way. You know, I've sort of got into a rhythm of this way of working. And actually, in terms of being able to engage a person, I haven't really fallen into any pitfalls yet. There hasn't been anything massive that's come along and been a real sort of path blocker where I'm thinking, how am I going to, you know, move around this? You know, the attributes inherent in music are still good enough to foster engagement, even with the online interface. I can still tune into a person's musical preferences and cultural underpinnings and social context to deliver the appropriate content and to structure the sessions accordingly. I can still do all that. Nothing's changed really. I can still reach the individual on an emotional level, on a social level, and on a cognitive level to make those sort of positive associations that music engenders naturally. The one thing I have noticed though is that the depth at which I can do those things has reduced quite a bit. So just to be analogous for a second, face-to-face work to me has always been like a very deep ocean where you can fully immerse yourself in what you're doing, and there really are no limits. You can dive right down and go with the individual to this quite magical place, and that's obviously really fantastic. The online work I see more as sort of paddling in a little paddle pool, you know, where you can't fully immerse, but you can sort of splash the water around, kick your feet in, and have a bit of fun. And that's great. You can have fun. That's the main thing. Can I still have fun here? Can the individual still laugh and have opportunities to be happy in this music session? Yes, they can. Okay, it's not as deep, but it's still fun. There's still a purpose here. So now I've sort of ironed out the practical considerations of my work, I've started to be maybe a little bit more philosophical about my position at the moment. I don't know if that's something you've explored in your own way.
Yeah, you know, I couldn't quite put it in words, but that totally resonates with me. It's just like paddling, but you know, it's like, do you have to go so in depth every time? Like, is that what the client needs? In this time, this time is crazy right now. Like the whole world collectively is a bit of crisis. And so I think honestly right now, like what we really need is that joy and spreading that joy, you know, just giving that engagement and reminding these people, hey, like you're not alone. Like I'm here and I'm so happy to be here with you. And like, thank you so much for being there with me. And that's what like I think a lot of people really need right now.
Yeah. This is the time for paddling, so to speak.
Right now, if someone were like, let's go in depth right now, I'm like, ooh, like I don't know, I got like a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah. Maybe the levity is what we need right now. But it's cool. It's good to hear that, you know, in the back of my mind, well, actually in the forefront of my mind, in my sessions, I'm always thinking about process. the process of music making. I'm not a clinician, so I'm not thinking about clinical demonstrable outcomes to present to a healthcare professional or a multidisciplinary team. I'm working really on the process of making music. And that's something that hasn't changed really, working online. And maybe that's even more important now than ever, to just be fun on that quite, and this isn't a negative word right now, but on that superficial level, to just
Yeah.
have fun moment.
I mean, and like sometimes we forget, you know, sometimes we're so caught up in like what's going on and all the things that we have to do that we just forget that the essence of music is just to have fun and to express yourself, and that's what's really most important.
Yeah, I completely agree. What This is a question I've asked everyone so far. What tips? I mean, obviously we're sort of hopefully slowly maneuvering out of lockdown now, back into some type of normality. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, obviously the situation's different. I'm in the UK. I'm in the southwest of England, so situation's obviously different. How is it, by the way, in California right now in terms of moving forward to face-to-face stuff?
You know, we're opening up right now, but I am definitely feeling pretty hesitant. The cases have been increasing a lot since they started opening up. And I just, you know, I would hate to put any of my clients in danger like that. So for right now, I definitely still gonna stay on hold. But we'll see. I mean, really, I'm just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah.
So we can really, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing as well. Yeah. I mean, for me, is I'm going to work at the pace that the government legislation dictates, if you know what I mean. So I'll move as fast or as slow as the general consensus, as dictated by the science and by the government information and so on. So that's taken the pressure off me a little bit, you know, that I can move with that tide. But yeah, I mean, for the time being, it's going to be online work for me. I mean, some of the people I work with are incredibly vulnerable, and they have lots of very complex health needs and comorbidities and all sorts of things that wouldn't be safe right now. Conversely, though, there are some individuals who don't have those complex health problems, and it might actually be viable for me to return to some form of face-to-face work for them. But again, that's still going to be weeks away yet. Things are getting relaxed a little bit at the beginning of July, so I'm going to take a view then and see what's what and go from there. But there's no pressure, you know. It's fine, you know. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've been exploring starting more online workshops, music-based workshops for self-care, and I think that that's kind of more where the direction that's speaking to me right now is doing more things like that. But we'll see. You know, it's just so crazy because all of this happened so fast, and I had all these ideas in my head in January 2020, and a lot of those things aren't going to happen anymore.
Yeah. A lot of stuff gets shelved, doesn't it? It's a shame because 2020 sounds like such an epic year as well, doesn't it? Like,
I mean, like the way that I was gaining contracts, I was like, oh, I'm ready. Like this is I'm off, and you know, but it's just a little plot twist in my life.
That's a good way. I like that. It's a plot twist. Yeah, like there's a major global plot twist. Yeah, it's tough. Oh, the question. Sorry, I was going to ask a question that I'd asked everyone, and then I digressed. It was that, what tips do you have for people, perhaps vulnerable people who are at home shielding right now? Tips, you know, ways to get involved in music and to have music experiences at home that might, you know, boost your mood and so on.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for my clients, especially my younger ones, just being like, hey, go around your house and find something that makes a cool sound and bring it back here. We'll use it. And that's really, you know, just be creative with what you have. It is hard because when you don't have any instruments and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? But if you really look, and you can get really, really creative, and that's what's really fun about it. I know that over the past, however many months, I've been exploring making beats, and just recording sounds, just like, hitting something on the table,
Yeah.
clapping something. And that's been really, really fun for me. Really
Right.
has taken me out of, my traditional thought of like what an instrument should sound like. But it really is just allowing yourself to be creative and to have fun. And I think that's really, once you allow yourself to be creative, there's so many things that open up for you.
It opens doors, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of working online, what advice would you give to people in our position who perhaps haven't gone online yet with their work because they're nervous about making that change? What advice would you give to sort of, make it look a little less daunting?
I think, man, it is like, it's just so different, and when you first start, it's overwhelming. But I think what helped me the most was not to think of it as this obstacle, and just kind of think it again like more of like a plot twist. Oh, this is like just something different, and like, how can I explore that? And changing that mindset for me from being like, oh my god, like what am I gonna do, to being like, hey, like, okay, so I have this, and like, how can I utilize it? Like, how can I explore all these different opportunities for me, and utilize it in a way that works and resonates for me. That's really, I found a way that's worked best for me.
That's good. I think that for me, and this may be drawing from my own experience, the advice I'd give would be to recognize that everything which happens externally can only happen in the way that you want it to if you first work on yourself and maybe internalize before you externalize. And for me, that came about in the form of working on a routine in which I was gaining focus so that I could make a plan. Because it's all very well making a plan when you're all frantic and all the emotions are running high, but sometimes you can lose the detail, and perhaps you can miss things. So to really sort of pull focus and become centered and to ground yourself, and of course that could be done with the aid of musical experiences as well. But for me personally, it was all about finding a routine that worked for me, so that that was acting as a springboard for ideas, that sense of being grounded. So that's the advice I would give, would to be, practical advice is great about what platform to use online and how to set up your space to be conducive for music engagement and so on. That's all great. I mean, I did give practical tips in previous videos, but then I thought it starts with you, right? It starts with how you conduct yourself and how you behave towards yourself and treat yourself. So I think maybe that's the way I'm looking at it now.
No, and like we both were talking earlier about burnout. I think that has been an issue with a lot of people before coronavirus hit. So for me, what it was I mean, like, for the past couple months, I can't really say that I've done a lot. I've done some classes, and I have a few individual clients that I've kept, but really what I really needed in this space was just some time to like chill out. And at first I really struggled with that, because I was like, oh, like I need to be like my career, I need to be doing something, like, oh my gosh, like my career. But when I really finally took a step back, that was like the best thing that's ever happened. I'm really lucky to have been able to do that, because now I'm like so much more focused. I know what direction I want to go. I know like what I like, what I don't like to do, and now I feel like I finally am able to have a plan and move forward in action.
And that's really good. And it does come across because I watched your online session that you did the other day, and it was really great, and I could feel your positive energy, and I could feel your focus, and that you knew where you were, where you are, and that sort of came through. And that's really great. So I'm glad that you found that space, and you're sort of operating outside of that positive space. That's really good. Yeah. That's okay. And so where are we at? Okay, so my initial thought was to keep these videos around 25, 30 minutes, just for anyone who's watching and wants to digest all these different things. So it feels like a good place um, to stop. But thank you very much, Mai, for talking to me. It was really, really enlightening hearing your perspectives, and very useful for me, and I hope very useful for anyone who's watching as well.
So much
And
for having me. This was very, very much a fun conversation for me to have.
yeah, good. And let's keep in touch. We'll stay in
Yeah,
touch and, like, touch base with one another about how things are going, because things are going to change quite drastically from here in. It'd be nice to sort of find out where we're at and what's working and what's not working as well.
definitely. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, best of luck with everything. I hope this week goes well. It's really hot, actually.
It's
It's
a hot one.
it's
Sweating a little.
31 degrees here, which I think is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just stupidly hot. And, being in the southwest of England, we're not used to this kind of heat, really.
Is it humid
So,
out
yeah,
there? Pretty dry.
it's a humid heat.
Oh God. Oh no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it must be quite humid in San Francisco when it gets hot, right? I mean, you have all the air blowing off the.
It doesn't get hot in the Bay. Oh, it does like more inland, but right around the San Francisco area, that's right by the ocean, so it really only gets up to like
Right.
60. Pretty cold, but out
Yeah.
here, I'm a little more inland. Should be about like I think it's about like 70 or 80, but it's pretty dry, so it's tolerable.
Yeah. It's the humidity here that gets you.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, really nice to speak to you, Mai, and let's speak again soon.
sounds
Thanks
good.
very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. See ya.